in the state, they said to us, look, the brain damage is so big that she's never, ever going to have any quality of life again. And you should put her into an institution and, that'll be it. And I'm like, no way in hell am I letting my mum into an institution. And I had a, months long battle while she was in the hospital, still in the rehab, which was a complete and utter joke, by the way. After 3 months in the hospital and fighting through the system and being told that she would never have anything, I finally got her to a point where they were releasing her and they didn't want to send her home. They said she has to go into an institution. She's 2 people round the clock here. And I just refused to sign any papers.
What if I told you that the same mindset that builds championship teams also builds an extraordinary life? The same discipline that drives elite performance to greatness is the discipline that unlocks a longer, stronger, and more resilient future. This is where peak health meets peak performance, where we explore the science of longevity and the mindset of greatness. Because your legacy isn't just what you leave behind, it's what you show up with every single day. This is the Legacy and Longevity Podcast. I'm Zach Dancel, your host. Welcome back to the Legacy and Longevity Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Dancel. We spend a lot of time talking about how we optimize the human machine, right? How to live longer, perform better, and lead with more impact. But what happens when that machine completely breaks, right? When your identity that you spent decades building and is stripped away and you've had to shift focus to something else. Most people think that resilience is just something that people are born with. You either have it or you don't. And my guest today is living proof that resilience isn't just a gift, right? It's practice over repetition, through the discipline. Lisa is a world-class ultra-endurance athlete who has run through the most punishing environments on earth. But her greatest race wasn't in the Sahara, right? It was when she was running through the obstacles of the traditional medical system, of the holes and the gaps that she faced when dealing with her mom's health. So Lisa, I just wanted to let you know, you represent the legacy and longevity ethos, because you've lived both ends of the spectrum. So I just wanted to welcome you to the show.
It's fantastic to be here. Thank you, Zach, for having me. And, we've just been chatting a bit off air and so many similarities in our backstories that I know we'll have a really interesting conversation for the people today.
No, definitely. I think, you've spent years, defining what your body could do, right? And, you are the strong one, right? The ultra runner, that doesn't just happen, because one day you decide to get up and just go and run an ultra marathon,
No.
right? That takes years and years of preparation and putting your body through adversity and obstacles that most people, when they face, it's just something that they can't hate. They can't handle, right? They crumble. They quickly turn and scour away because most people are afraid to do those hard things, right? Walk us through the transition, right? When you were at that highest level in that capacity, and then, when everything shifted away where you had to say, okay, I have to hang up, my running shoes and really go all in on something that's near and dear to me, that, the thing that keeps me ticking every single day is my family, right? That you were in that spot. So walk us through that transition.
Yeah. So, Zach, I spent 25 years racing the world's toughest endurance events on the planet, did over 70,000 kilometers in that time, ran through things like Death Valley in the USA and Badwater Ultramarathon a couple of times, and, through the Sahara and, Gobi Desert and the Himalayas, everywhere. I never had any talent, so I was very, very a person who had to grind and work really hard for everything that I did. I was very, very average athlete, really, but or below average, actually. One of the scientists, I remember the exercise scientist measuring my VO2 max and going, "Yeah, you're way below average, and you shouldn't be doing this." And I'm like, "Yeah, lucky no one told me that, because I did get to number 10 in the world at one point." But I had that mindset of grind it out, do the work, if you work really hard enough, you can achieve it. And I did in the sporting sense. And then a decade ago now, my mum, who was the sort of rock of my world and this wonderful, loving mum who had, 3 kids that she just spent her entire life looking after, even when we were adults, never paid any attention to her own health. And, being a selfish athlete, I just expected all of that sort of stuff as a young person. And then one morning I got this, dreadful phone call that we all dread. Mum's collapsed. She's in the hospital. Get up here now. And that was a decade ago. And we raced to the hospital, and the ambulance driver had thought that she was having a stroke or an aneurysm or some neurological event, and told the doctor that. But the doctor decided to ignore him and just thought, nah, she's just having a migraine, and left her there for 6 hours. And I had no medical background at that point, and I didn't know what to ask for or what to, to do. And I was watching my mum in extreme agony. Apparently, when you have an aneurysm, it's the worst pain that you could possibly have, as your brain is expanding inside a skull that is not moving, and horrific pain. And I knew she was not one to complain. After 4 hours of sitting there, sort of like not knowing what to do, I rang a friend who was a paramedic who had crewed for me in some of my races, who knew the people up there. And she came up and took one look at mum and went, yeah, she's having an event. Went and told this doctor in no uncertain terms to go and get her a CT scan. And eventually he relented after 6 hours, and it came back, yep, massive aneurysm. They didn't expect her to live. And I live in a very little rural town, and so we had no neurological unit. They had to get an air ambulance, which was another 12-hour wait to get down to Wellington, our capital city, to try and save her life. It was the longest day of my life, trying to wait for that. And then, the doctors down there did an amazing job, straight into surgery, managed to start draining the blood off the brain and doing the things that they do. And in this time, in this medical misadventure, really put me on high alert that you don't just sit back and let the doctors take care of it. And at that point I had no knowledge, right? But I was promised, the God and the universe, that if I was given a second chance with my mum, that I would do whatever it took to get her back. And I've sort of stayed true to that promise ever since. And she spent 3 weeks in ICU, touch and go, in and out of a coma. They did another operation, etc. They didn't know whether she would survive for quite a long time, but after 3 weeks she did stabilize, and they knew that she was going to survive. But she had massive brain damage, so she was like a baby in an adult body. She had no idea who she was, what she was, where her body was. She had no vestibular system. She was paralyzed on the right side, no speech. She had a couple of words that she would say over and over, and that was about it. And in the state, they said to us, look, the brain damage is so big that she's never, ever going to have any quality of life again, and you should put her into an institution, and, that'll be it. And I'm like, no way in hell am I letting my mum into an institution. And I had a, months-long battle while she was in the hospital, still in the rehab, which was a complete and utter joke, by the way. While I fought to try to take her home, and I started to study. And I came across actually an American doctor, Dr. Paul Harch, who was a hyperbaric oxygen therapy specialist. And I read his book about how hyperbaric oxygen can really be powerful for brain injuries. And I thought, like, this is something that I could grab onto, right? And so I started to, well, where can I do this? In my little hometown, there was no hyperbaric clinic, but I had a commercial dive company that had one. And I approached these people and I asked them very nicely if I could please bring my very invalided mother to them. And these kind, lovely people said, yes, sign a legal waiver and we'll let you do that. So after 3 months in the hospital and fighting through the system and being told that she would never have anything, I finally got her to a point where they were releasing her, and they didn't want to send her home. They said she has to go into an institution. She's 2 people round the clock here. And I just refused to sign any papers, and they really tried to force me. And I took my big brother, who looks like The Rock, with me to the meetings, and we got what we wanted eventually. And I was released to my home and to my care. And I remember the social worker saying to me, you'll be back here begging for my help in 2 weeks. You won't handle this. And I'm like, threw my books at him, because I've written a couple of books about my ultra endurance things. And I'm like, this is who we are, and we're not giving up, And So instead, I wrote a book about Mum's journey, and I wrote about him and his attitude. It was my revenge. Um, but I took her home. We started to put her in the hyperbaric oxygen clinic, and I started to develop studying, everything about neurology and brains and how they work, and functional medicine and diet and keto diet and supplements, and doing all of these things that I started to do. And she had 33 treatments at this hyperbaric oxygen clinic, or commercial dive center, I should say. And she started to respond. Like, she didn't get up and walk. She was starting to say a few words. Her right arm was starting to move. She was starting to respond. And then I lost access to the chamber because it had to be taken off on a contract. And so another obstacle, what do I do now? So I worked out about, buying a hyperbaric chamber and installing it, and which was not easy, and then getting a very invalid person into the hyperbaric chamber when it wasn't one of these big, big ones. It was a small home chamber, and having to find ways around every little obstacle that you have. And so I devised to come back to your story, like your question, sorry, because I've gone on a bit. This was a huge transition where I had to drop everything, and it was, focus fully on Mum and try to survive making a living, whatever I could do while I was rehabilitating her. And I had a sort of an 8-hour program a day of rehabilitation. And the doctor said to me, look, she's got neural fatigue. You can't do it. She has no focus. You can't train her for more than a few minutes at a time. She has too much fatigue. And I said, absolute rubbish. I can find ways around that, right? So if she would tire, because her focus was very, very limited to a few seconds, then I would do something else, and then we'd do something else, and then I'd let her rest. And then when her body couldn't move, I moved her body for her. I just found a way around every possible obstacle. And it was, 8 hours of rehabilitation a day, and my family and behind me as well. And it was an incredibly tough journey, and we spent months not seeing any progress. And then
Yeah.
have a big jump up in the progress, right? All of a sudden she would gain something back, and then we'd have another plateau, and that's how biology goes. It doesn't go up in a straight line. It's just like the stock market. It doesn't just go up and to the right. It has ups and downs and roundabouts, but over time, like the stock market, if you stay in it long enough, it usually goes up and to the right? And this is what happened with Mum. So step by step, it took me a bit over a year to get her to stand without falling. So she knew where her body was, her vestibular system was. It took me 2.5 years to get her back to full capacity, full driver's license, full power of attorney, walking 5Ks a day, going to the gym again, full back into life. And this was said to be an absolutely impossible journey. And that was round one, Zach. That was round one. Yeah.
No, I mean I former athlete myself, it's I can't speak more highly enough in how important just competitive sports are at a young age, right? To teach the lessons of the wins and losses, right? Your success and failures, right? It it gives you that ability to face the hardships early, right? That you know life life is not easy, right? Life is going to be difficult, no matter how successful you are, and no matter how much you fail, right? It's going to be hard. You have to choose which hard you choose, right? Or which hard that you want in life, right? Because it's hard to be successful, but it's also hard to be broke and poor. It's hard to be healthy, but it's also hard to be sick and crippled with the illness, right? So again, it's choosing that hard, and I think sports gives you both sides of the coin, right? And gives you that mental toughness at an early age of, you just faced an obstacle and adversity. How are you going to overcome it, right? I think it was foundational for me at a young age to go through those things to, learn from them, but then also to learn that whatever I put in is ultimately what I get out, right? That I couldn't be stopped as long as I was willing to put the time, the effort, the work into it. I was going to, ultimately determine how successful that I really was. And I think in your scenario, right, with your mom, where you were constantly being told you can't, you can't, you can't, these obstacles, right? It was just it's just that different mindset shift that um especially in today's day and age, not a lot of people have, right? So, how did sports or ultra marathon running, build up that mental toughness for you? And how did you take that and put it into your everyday life?
Yeah, yeah, absolute perfect, Zach. We're just so aligned there. And yeah, I grew up in a very sporty household where there were a lot of expectations. So I was a gymnast as a young girl, and my father expected us to represent our country. It was just expected. So there was a lot of pressure and a lot of expectations, and sometimes that was hard, especially when you failed and you grew too tall and you weren't the right shape for a gymnast, and all the things that can be out of your control. And that's the other thing. Some things are in your control, some things are out of your control, but you have to go in with the attitude that you're going to give it everything that you've got, and then you leave the rest up to the gods, right? And you have to sort of let go of the consequences of that. Like, that is, you've done what you can do. You did your part of the bargain, you've done your thing, and then you've given it your best shot, and then it'll be what it'll be. And you learn that also when you're standing on the beginning of say an ultra marathon. Say you're facing down 220 k's in the Himalayas, like I've done a few times, and you're about to take on the extreme altitudes and extreme weather and extreme cold and extreme heat and all this sort of stuff, and you're just absolutely shaking in your boots. You have to go, right, I'm divorcing myself from the outcome of this race, and I'm focusing on, I have done the work, I have prepared the best I can do, I have the best team around me, because teamwork is hugely important, and we're going. And I'm in the moment, and I'm staying here, I'm in the battle, I'm in the now, and trying not to go too far into the future, which is easier said than done. But you are in the daily grind of things, right? And when you stay in that present and you just keep fighting on, then you achieve distances, in my case, of horrifically long races, and that you think halfway through, quarter of the way through, you think, I have nothing left and I cannot take another step, and you break. You might lie on the ground, bawl your eyes out, and then 5 minutes later you get up and you take another step. It's not about the fact that you don't cry, that you don't break, that you're not a complete and utter mess in the corner at some point, right? Because all of those things I've experienced quite often, still do, where I'm utterly broken, but I get up the next day and I go again. That's the difference, right? You never give up. You just keep going forward somehow. You don't know how, you just do. And you're allowed to cry, you're allowed to moan, you're allowed to have a moment. As long as you get back up again the next day or the next minute, and you carry on your race. And I think that mindset of never letting, I've also been told my entire life, like, you can't do that. You can't run across the Death Valley. You can't run across the Sahara. You're an asthmatic. You're no good in the mountain. You can't. And they were all wrong, because I did do them somehow. Maybe not the fastest, maybe not the best, but somehow I achieved those things. And so when the doctor comes along and says, Isabel, you've got brain cancer, there is nothing we can do, you are going to die in the next few weeks, you're like, hell no. No, I'm going to go to the people that I know in the world. And luckily I have a podcast that Zach's going to be on called Pushing the Limits. And I have a wonderful network of people, and I built, that I spent a decade working on, to build these connections and and I said, help, and went out into the world and started studying cancer after I'd already, been through this whole aneurysm journey. Unfortunately, my mum got brain cancer and was given weeks to live and nothing you can do. Took us 12 weeks to get rid of the cancer, and we're now 4.5 years later. I've written a book on cancer, and she hasn't got any currently. And you never want to say you're cured either. Like, it's a daily battle, like it's a day regime, it's a daily training schedule, it's a daily protocol of supplements that she has to take, it's a strict diet that she's on. And when other people are, not having to do all of those things, but she's alive, she's got a good quality of life still. She's got some.
And did you do that without traditional treatment?
So at that point, Zach, I went everything. To be honest, I went both sides of the fence because she was in an advanced stage. I needed to debulk the cancer quickly because her brain, half of her brain was cancer when we got to it. So we had surgical. I didn't do radiation, or I did advanced genetic testing, which gave me the information about what her body and her genetics and her cancer would respond to. And that's not something that's standard offered, by the way. You can get advanced genetic testing. I worked out which of the chemos, which of the immunotherapies was indicated in her particular genetics and her particular case. They were not standard of care, so I had to fight like hell to get those. And I did go down that path. And then at the same time, she was on over 150 pills a day of natural supplements. We did off-label drug combinations, things like metformin and atorvastatin and
Did you do any ivermectin, fenbendazole, membendazole, any methylene blue?
yeah, she's still on that.
I'm assuming you did a complete metabolic reset with her diet and her gut health.
Exactly.
Obviously, the whole you had already done hyperbaric, right? But I'm assuming you gave her a bunch of hyperbaric to over oxygenate, her blood cells, because obviously cancer cells, they don't like they don't like oxygen, right? So you did that. You starved out, I'm sure, by eliminating sugars, any glucose that you could. Any like IV ozone or ozone therapy at all?
Yeah, ozone. So we had one ozone blood one, but we couldn't get that in my town. So I bought an ozone machine and I at least do the water and the other forms that you can take it. We do, hyperbaric, red light therapy, PMF, peptides, not easy to get in New Zealand, I can tell you. I'm very creative. Um, yes, methylene blue, she's still on that to this day. Yeah, nicotine, patches, over 150 different pills, like curcumin, resveratrol, green tea extract, all of these great polyphenols and stuff. Very strict keto diet to begin with, and then a little bit more sort of a Mediterranean type of diet now. Training to, because you've got to keep the muscle mass, you've got to keep all of that sort of stuff going. Does weight training all the time. So all of the above, bioregulator peptides, everything. And looking back over that time, I sort of regret the chemotherapy, but then at the same time, I don't know, it did debulk the cancer, but you never want to rely on chemotherapy, right? It's good for debulking and giving you some time to save yourself. Like if the tumors are that big that it can, it's going to kill you very quickly, then sometimes you need to go that path as well, but with the understanding that that is always going to be a temporary fix and that they're back stronger probably, so you don't just go, oh, I'm on chemo and I'm going to be fine. Hell no. You need to take that really holistic look. And a lot of the damage that was sustained throughout her treatments was from the chemo, unfortunately. So she has developed hydrocephalus. So her balance is very poor, and that haunts us to this day because she has to be supervised now walking. So there's been some downsides to it, and she's 84 now, and she's had a hip fracture and sepsis and gastrointestinal bleeding episodes and COVID and everything else in between on top of all of that. But we're every day at the gym, we're every day out at the cafe having a nice time with her girlfriends and doing the things that she likes to do, shopping, all of that sort of stuff. And I do have to arrange my complete and utter life around her needs now, but she's still my mum and she's still here. That's all that matters.
No, it is all that matters, right? She's here. You've embodied what I personally, like I said in the beginning of the show, to me, it's all about family, right? And without family, I don't know what else there would be to do here, right? Because at the end of the day, I go to my family in the morning, and when I first start my day, I start with them. When I want to share or embrace, the good moments or the bad moments, right? I'm spending it with them, right? Like, to me, there's nothing more important than family, and that can be both with blood and the chosen family, right? To me, I have a very close but small circle, right? And there's not anything that I wouldn't do for them, and I know that they feel the same way about me. There's not anything that they wouldn't do for me, and there's just a comfort in having that type of connection to community, right? To what I consider my community. And obviously, if you look at all the blue zones across the country or across the world, one of the big things and big pillars that they constantly had in all of these were community. And I think also, in this grand scheme of this longevity world that we're talking about and social media, um, hearing more about it, but it's getting kind of oversaturated with the biohacks, the wearables, the cool text gadgets, blah blah blah, where people forget about the pillars, right? That there is nothing more important than what the pillars are. You could do all the biohacks and have all the wearables, the cool gadgets, the cool supplements, whatever. But if you don't have your pillars of your sleep, your diet, your exercise, your stress management, and your community, I don't care what you're doing. I don't care what you buy or what you're on. There's nothing that you can do without having those as a solid foundation, and then bringing those on to stack on top, right? Because I do think that there are great tools out there, wearables to be able to track more data. Obviously, supplements is a huge thing. Diagnostics, right? What we're able to do and test for is growing and expanding, and it's especially in the functional medicine space. Like, if you have the opportunity to pay for these additional testing, because obviously insurance is not going to cover it, right? Insurance companies and the big pharma groups, they are not in the business of keeping people healthy.
Hell no.
um, I've personally experienced that, not with just my family, but also with that at Nava, where quick little story, and we could talk about this on your show. um, so we're located in the DMV, right? So the Washington, the nation's capital, is right there. So we have a bunch of federal employees that come to us. So the federal insurance is Care First, right? So 50% of the clients that come to Nava are under Care First, because that's what's in the area. And because we started growing and scaling, we started getting really big, a flag went on our account because we were spending more time with our clients and ordering more tests
Yeah, yeah.
like vitamin D, like B12, that other doctors in our niche, or like my medical director is a former OBGYN. So they were comparing our practice, functional longevity medicine, towards to other OBGYNs. So they saw that we were spending more time with our clients,
Yeah,
right?
terribly.
So we spend on average 30 to 60 minutes, right? Because that's the time that it takes to truly get to know everything that is going on. You can't learn anything about somebody in 7 to 10 minutes, right? Which is what the national average is. And you can't learn anything through a simple CBC or CMP, which is what the only thing that they run, or they run it when they say they run a thyroid panel, they're only running TSH, which doesn't tell you much of anything of what's
Right.
actually happening to someone's thyroid. So we got flagged about a year and a half, 2 years ago, because we were spending more time with clients, and we were ordering more labs than other OBGYNs, and they haven't paid us for 3 years, or 3 years. They haven't paid us for 2 years. So we did. I mean, we've been around for 12 years. We started off as only cash, and then COVID happened, and some of the reimbursement guidelines changed, right? Which allowed us to do it. And so we followed everything to a T. What needed to be discussed in these appointments, the time duration, et cetera, et cetera. Checked all the boxes, showed them this on paper, right? Yet they were still, what it came down to is they were like, we don't have the bandwidth to go through all these documents. It does look like you guys did conduct these, but ultimately, what they are, not word for word, but verbatim. But basically, they said they're just not in this line of the business,
No,
right?
no,
You know,
they're
they're,
not
this isn't just what they're exactly. So, that kind of goes back to what you were talking about before is stop outsourcing your health, right? Talk to us a little bit more about what that means to you. Because I say all the time, you got to be the CEO of your own health, right? Because no one is going to come and do it for you. No one's going to make you go lift that weight. No one's going to make you put down the Twinkie, and no one's going to make you, take the pill. So talk to us about what that means to you.
Yeah, I mean, 100% what you just said, and that is the mark of a good practice and a good doctor's. Because, and it's the same here. I've got a functional doctor here that gets the same problems. They're doing extra testing because they're things that work, right? And they're things that we need to know, like your magnesium, your B12, your zinc levels, your vitamin D levels, your basics, your homocysteine levels, the things that are not in the standard. And it just drives me absolute nuts when I'm working on, because I'm not a doctor. I work in the functional medicine space. I'm trained in genetics, etc., and hyperbaric and stuff, but I'm not a doctor, so I can't prescribe these things or get the tests done for you. What you need to take away from this is that you have to go private. Basically, you have to pay for health. Even if you have insurance and you think that you're not going to get the best quality of care by a long shot because the doctors are hamstrung and they're not able to do the things that they would like to do if they were not constrained by these stupid, you've got to do it in 7 minutes and don't look into the hood and see anything that's going on. That sort of stuff makes me really angry. And then there's the whole prevention side of thing. I've just developed an app called yourhealthcompass.org, yourhealthcompass.org, and it's looking at 14 scientifically validated questionnaires, right, on things like diabetes, asthma, lupus, prostate cancer, breast cancer, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, bone health, sleep apnea, and a couple of others. And what this does is it gives you an early indication if you're heading off track, right? So it's a preventive medicine strategy. And, I've made this app. It's like $19. It doesn't cost much to do the questionnaires. But the whole thing, the point of it is that you catch things early. You take the questionnaires, these are all been scientifically validated, and it might come back that, hey, looks like you're high risk for diabetes. Well, then you can go and do something about it before it becomes a problem, right? And so this is proactive preventative health. Now, will this app save the millions of lives? It could, probably not, because people have to pay privately for it, even though it's only $19 and it's not exactly, super expensive. But trying to sell people prevention is a really hard thing. But I put this out there in the world because I thought it was another cheap, accessible test that people could do. I also created another app called My Immune Age calculator, myimmuneage.life. But then I ran into legal problems because it held personal health data. And you try and get through HIPAA and you try and get through GPDR and all the other things. So what this one did, and it's not available in America because I can't get HIPAA and so on, but it takes your basic CBC, your blood tests, your neutrophils, lymphocytes, all of that, and it breaks it down into ratios, which gives you a ton of insight as a layperson or as a clinician as to which part of your immune system is going awry. Things like the neutrophil to lymphocyte ratio, a really big indicator. And, people could probably work it out themselves by doing the calculations. But this is like this. But again, I was blocked by legal, right? I don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to spend on legal fees to get this recognized as software as a medical device, which is what it falls under. And so this incredible tool, this one, doesn't, won't get to market probably, and this is the frustration that you and I have, is that we know things that could help people and we're not allowed to do it and not allowed to say it. And when it comes to, like, I have a biotech company as well, and we're going after immunosenescence, which is the aging of the immune system. And we have a product, it's actually in the States, called Cell Restore, and it's at OHP Health if anyone wants to look it up. But in New Zealand, that's called Rejuvenate Pro. And, we spent 2 years on this formulation. We've got 15 years worth of clinical research behind it. It's really well-researched product that really helps with gut health, immunity, and longevity because of all of that. really unique combination of things. Really difficult to get all that to market. And then you'll get things like Google coming after you. Like you can't advertise it on Google. Like I've just spent the last week fighting Google.
Before we continue, I want to share something deeply personal. The real reason my family started Nava Health. Over a decade ago, my mom was on her deathbed. Her organs were failing, and the doctors told us there was nothing they could do except keep her comfortable. In that moment, everything changed. We realized traditional medicine had limits, especially when it came to proactive and preventative root cause medicine built for long term health span and lifespan. At Nava Health, we take a data driven precision approach to longevity. We test over 90 biomarkers to uncover exactly what's happening inside your body, and we build a personalized plan designed around your unique biology. Because fatigue, brain fog, weight gain, they're not random, they're signals. And when you listen, your body can heal. This is functional longevity medicine done right, comprehensive, proactive, and built to help you feel and perform your best at any age. Go to navacenter.com and take control of your health today. Now back to the show. Where the industry stands today, right? It's set up against people like us and functional medicine providers and people who want to talk about longevity and people who want to achieve longevity, right? Because there's enough data and science out there that eventually will become available. But it is available right now, right? It's just a matter of how to get to it and how to find it. That shows, right, the things that you can do to prevent cancer, to prevent heart disease, without medications, right? Without the products that are making big pharma, billions and trillions of dollars, right? As well as insurance companies, right, through their pharmacy benefit managers, right, because they get a cut in that.
Yeah.
Um, so it's all the system, and I say this all the time. The system the system is not broken. For the system operates and gets the outcomes exactly how it was set up to get. Right, where they're driving more
Yeah.
profits,
Yeah.
right, more and more each year, and the sicker that people are, the better that they do.
No
Right.
more prevention.
The one of the largest. This would be an easy stat for someone to look up. One of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. It's been around for over 170 years, hasn't created one cure. I don't know how you can call yourself a pharmacy company and not actually create a cure, right? So the future of medicine, right, is proactive. It is preventative. Those things, it's not a myth, right? Those things can actually happen. We do it every single day with thousands of clients.
We see it and we're not allowed to talk about it. We're not allowed to put it on our website. So you're not allowed to, like, I had to take off all my reviews because my people that were writing reviews for me were writing things like, talking about how their arthritis got better or how their gut got better. You're not allowed to say that. Google will come after you and then you're banned, the whole website banned and all of that sort of stuff, for reviews from other people. Like, you know,
No, but I mean that's where like the power of platforms like podcasting, right?
yeah.
Where it gives us the ability to come on, right, and to use our voice, and it allows, whether TikTok puts it as a hides it from the public because
Yep. They do that too. YouTube.
whether it's YouTube or Instagram, right, because it violated some policy. It gets out there somehow, some way, but it's just it's a shame, but I think, we're making strides in the right direction, right? The more people that we have, yeah, the more voices we can use.
We've got that athlete mentality. We'll just keep grinding. We're up against big forces, but we probably won't be able to save the world, but might be able to save some people, or at least open people's eyes to what they can achieve and what they, like we know that a lot of the natural supplements are more powerful than the cancer drugs or things like that, and we're not allowed to say that, and you're not allowed to, like even imply that. But just go and do your research, people, on some of these things, and you'll find if you dig deep enough, you'll start to come across the stuff.
Yeah. No. It's a shame. So, one of the things that I think you hit on a lot, and you talk about, obviously it still goes back to the mindset and just this athlete mindset, but a lot of the times the mind quits, long before our bodies do. Right, and in the world of longevity, right, we talk about hormesis all the time, right? This idea that of a little bit of stress will make your system stronger, right? Like sit in that cold plunge, for 2 to 3 minutes, right? Go to the gym, do something strenuous, right? We're not saying to go to the gym and become, this huge bodybuilder, right? Just do something that puts a little bit of stress on your body, right? Because that's what's going to push you. That little bit of stress is going to make the system stronger, right? But in modern culture, you know, they've come obsessed with comfort, right? We've labeled discomfort as danger, and I think that's what is making a lot of people fragile. Um, and you do a great job of differentiating that. Can you kind of talk to us about how to retrain our nervous system and stop viewing this discomfort as the signal to quit?
Yeah, yeah, it is exactly right. And hormesis is, the ability to be able to take the stress and respond to it. And um, you, what I do see some athletes doing is going too much the other way, right? You're stacking all these somatic stresses on top of each other, and that becomes too much for the body. And as somebody who's done extreme amounts of exercise, that was not conducive to longevity, right? Because so I want to differentiate that. The stuff that doing, running through Death Valley or the Sahara is not good for your health. It was a sporting challenge for a reason, but I had to spend the next 6 months recovering from those things. So sometimes I see, for example, high-powered executives that are doing their morning plunge and then doing their breath work and then hopping in the sauna and then doing their red light and then training for 2 hours at nighttime and then wondering why they're putting on weight and wondering why they're and it's because you've gone too far the opposite direction, right? You're actually
Yeah.
overwhelming your system. So you gotta caveat that and give your body enough of a signal to create the change, but not too much that you completely overwhelm it and cause more inflammation. Like too much exercise, you'll have more inflammation. I suffered from that for a long time because I was daily in the grind of doing hundreds of hours of running. Ended up massive inflammation in the body that was just as bad as sitting on the couch and eating chips. So you've got to understand the way the body is, and it's all about the Goldilocks zone that we're trying to find. But what I think is really important is that you do things that are slightly uncomfortable every day outside of your comfort zone, and where that means starting where you are. So that might be walking to the letterbox if you're 84 and you've been in a wheelchair for 2 years and you're just coming out. That might be just getting to the letterbox, right? And for another person, that same impetus might be running a marathon and they're well trained to do that and they can do that, right? So you've got to put it in perspective of where that is and understand that you are stacking all of these things on top of each other. So you've got to respond. But the thing is, the tougher you are, if the more that you go back to the way that we evolved as human beings, that we were in tune with the circadian rhythms, that we got early morning sunlight, that we had firelight only at night, so the orange lights, avoiding the blue lights, that you weren't constantly overstimulated by things like social media and the news coming after, because those are all like tigers chasing you all day.
Yeah.
The accountant, the boss ringing you, all of these are lions that are chasing us, and that's really tough nowadays to bring the nervous system down. So the biggest battle I have personally, and I think a lot of people that are type A personalities and really go-getters, is bringing my brain back down and my nervous system back down. So for me, it's not about exercising more, because I'll have a tendency to do that anyway. It's about taking the 5 minutes breath work. It's about the meditation. It's about going to bed at the right time. It's about avoiding the blue light at night and the stimulus at night, and trying not to be on my computer at 10 o'clock at night. Doesn't always work. But doing these things that calm the nervous system down, right? So that I think a lot of us are dealing with that, a sympathetic dominant system that is not recovering. Because when you're in that sympathetic state, and like I'm in that state a lot of the time because I have a mum who's very fragile and I'm 24/7 caregiver running 3 companies and so on. So it's really tight. So sometimes I just have to go and lie down for 5 minutes and do some breath work and just try and cope, or do a little physiological size or something to bring my nervous system down, and do that regularly. And then put in good inputs. So the right diet, the right supplements for me, those little bits of care rituals, a little bit of yoga at night and a bit of hyperbaric for myself. And, those little bits of moments that I get to care for myself trying to take those and run with them. Not easy, but really important to try to prioritize those. And that's something I'm still working on, by the way. And I think a lot of us probably are that are really, let's just get after it sort of mentality.
It's finding the perfect balance, know that it's never gonna be perfect, right? It's especially as athletes, there's always going to be room for improvement. Like, there's never a point where we get to the finish line, right? That finish line kinda just keeps moving out for us, and me further and further and further. Even though we get closer and closer, it seems to just continue to get further, and, that's part of, like, that's part of the mindset, right? Just be willing to continue to go, but also self-observant of when it is that time to rest, and not necessarily rest because you're tired, right? But rest so that you can keep going, right? Like, there's a difference, right? There's a very big difference in, when people talk about burnout, right? I'm not getting tired because I'm being burnt out for what I do, right? I love what I do every day. Like, there is nothing that I would rather do than do what I am doing right now, right? So do I get tired? Yes, but it's not because I'm burning out. It's because, I am passionate, right? I have that fire in my belly that just kind of just keeps me going. And when it's time for me to rest, it's that time, or when it's time for me to do the recovery things that you're talking about, the hyperbaric, that's to allow me to keep going, not so I stop.
Yeah, and not seeing that as selfish. Um, I mean, I'm in a particularly difficult situation, if you like, where, as a caregiver in a 24-hour sort of scenario for 10 years, like that's a long time, plus running, multiple companies and trying to be strong, fit, and capable at 57. So you got a whole lot of combinations going on. So knowing that you're under that load, trying to, you know, in my case, I can't get help, so I have to just go, right, this is the situation. So what can I do to try to, help myself? It means good food. It means good going to bed early, and not overtraining and not doing the things, not drinking, not, doing the things that I can't afford to be doing if I want to keep my mission going.
Yeah. What was the hardest run that you ever had to do?
Oh my God, there's so many. So I did a back in my early days. I did an illegal crossing of a Libyan desert, which was an expedition that we did through in the border of Libya and Egypt. This beautiful desert called the White Desert, and we had to cover this territory. It was 250 kilometers, no outside help, no water en route, so we had to carry the entire supply, which meant like 35-kilo backpacks. And there was four of us, the boyfriend and I at the time, and then Yugoslavian survival expert by the name of Elvis, who was in charge of the expedition. And that was really extreme because we had to get out from the oasis without the military seeing us, because we weren't allowed. It was a military area because Libya and Egypt weren't on friendly terms, as you can imagine, and try and cross this desert with 2 liters of water a day, doing 45 kilometers a day with 35-kilo backpacks. If you do the math, if you're an athlete, if you know what it means to have only 2 liters of water and those temperatures, that was really extreme, which nearly killed me. It took me 2 years to recover physically. The relationship also broke up in the middle of it. So there was a emotional turmoil of the boyfriend literally left me in the middle of a desert after a 5-year relationship. And so there was all that going on. So that was pretty tough. Another one I did in Niger, 330K race across Niger, which is one of the poorest countries in the Sahara, poorest countries in the world. And there were only 17 runners, and it was a really badly organized race. And we all got, five of us got food poisoning from a goat curry that we'd eaten the night before the race. So basically, if you can imagine having diarrhea and vomiting all the way across the Sahara while you're trying to run 330 Ks, that was really good. While you're in the middle of going through a divorce at the same time as well. I seem to have had divorces and relationship strife in the middle of these really difficult.
Yeah. I mean, talking about battling adversity, right? While your body is breaking down, I'm sure just mentally I mean, some of the things that were probably running through your mind as well as dealing with that. What talk to us, like, what is that mental battle, right? And how to overcome it while you're going through those difficult times, and like whether or not you're telling yourself, should I just give up, right?
Like in the Libyan desert, like when the boyfriend left me on day 4 and we were extremely dehydrated. Like you have not experienced torture of being really dehydrated. Like it's just horrific. And so we're all very short tempered, obviously. And then having that emotional turmoil of him leaving me in the middle of it, and I started to fall apart emotionally, and then I realized, like I could not afford to fall apart, and that I had to compartmentalize to survive. If I was going to get out alive, I had to make sure that I wasn't crying all the water that I needed out, right? I needed to, and all the energy that I needed. So I had to go, right, I'm dealing with that later. Right now, I've got to put one foot in front of the other and get the hell out of here, and learned to compartmentalize my emotional turmoil from what was going on from the actual survival situation that I was in right then and there. And that really helped when I was going with mum through stuff, was being able to compartmentalize the shit that was coming at us, and whether and the fact that she was possibly going to die, and staying in the moment, staying with it right now, and compartmentalizing the rest for later to deal with. Which, and when you do that over and over again, I probably could do with a psychologist trying to sort out the trauma of all of this. Um, but you have to be able to function when the shit hits the fan, so to speak, and just keep going, and put all the rest aside. So that was one really good lesson that I learned, and that, you know, you cannot be an emotional wreck while you're in a survival situation at the same time. So you have to sort of put that aside and carry on, and then fall apart later when you're back home, which you did. But, not when you're dire straits. Get through the dire straits first.
No, wow, that's man, that's quite a story.
Yeah, yeah. And, I unfortunately got quite a lot of those, but
Well, before I close things out, there's just a couple questions I'd like to kind of just rapid fire as we close out. First one being is, what's the best advice you've ever received?
from my mum when I was running through New Zealand for charity, when I was doing 2,250 kilometers. So I don't know, they're about 1,600, 1,700 miles, something like that. Um, and I was freaking out at the start line, going, how am I going to cover these 2,000 plus kilometers? Oh my God, like freaking out, because it all sort of hit you after all the preparations, and then suddenly realizing you actually got to run this thing. And my mum said, you don't, right now, you've just got to focus on getting to that power pole up there. That's your job. You're not running the 2,000 kilometers today. You're running them consecutively over the next 42 days it took me to do it. But focus on that first power pole, focus on the first half an hour, then we'll get to lunchtime, then we'll talk about it there, right? And then gave me a hug and kicked me up the bum and told me to go. And then she followed me in the car for 42 days, like that's the sort of mum she is, right? And that was the best advice. Focus on the very next thing you have to do. When you look too far ahead, when you're taking on a massive challenge, then you will be overwhelmed. You've got to pull your focus in into what have I got to do now? Because if you look at the whole thing, you'll just be like, I'll never get there. And then I did get there. Took 42 days, but I got there and we made it.
Well, I mean, it clearly showed. I mean, look, she knew that you were more capable than what you knew, what yourself was capable at that time, and pushed you to a place where like you had to go, right, to accomplish those things. And um, you know, uh, we just have so many similarities, right? Because my parents were the same way, right? It wasn't, participation trophies in our household weren't a thing, right? It's either you won the trophy or you lost. But guess what? There was another tournament the next week, and then I had another chance to go out and win it. And it was just like one of those mindsets, right? Just that failure wasn't an option. You keep going, right? Just keep that mindset. So that's awesome. Um, what is the biggest problem in the world right now that you're personally trying to solve?
Yeah, just what we were talking about before. Like, how do we get this message through to people? The passion that you and I have to help people because we've seen and been and done and experienced things that we don't want other people to experience. That's my big mission in life, is to help as many people as I can and have a positive impact on the world before I leave it in the best way I can. And that means trying to just educate, give people empowerment, inspire them how to do this mentally, and also what they need to be looking at, from a the consulting side of it, all the stuff that you and I do for day to day, um, and just trying to help people, as many people as I can, through that journey in a positive fashion. Don't always win, don't always get the successes that you want to see. Sometimes you do, and that's very gratifying. And I just would like to grow the impact that I have. I feel sometimes like, uh, you see other podcasters or influencers or whatever you want to call what we do, um, and you're like, damn, why can't I have this bigger impact like that? And so that's the new trophy to be chasing. I think the new sort of stuff for us is like, want to have a bigger impact. Get frustrated, can't, and that's an ongoing journey. But doing what you can while you can, you know.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, because look, we both have just this great wealth of knowledge of not just what it takes to be healthy, right? But just what it takes to win at life, right? There's winners and there's losers. There's no in between, right? You're one or the other. And there's a reason why there's so few losers or winners, right? Because the winners are willing to keep going and keep getting back up even after they get knocked down. But it's also why majority of the population is sick, right? Because what it takes to be healthy, right? They envision is hard, and most people aren't willing to do those hard things.
Yeah, and it's particularly hard in our environment, the way that our society is set up, the way our food chains are set up, the way our drug situation is set up. Everything is, set against you, so you have to work harder. But having said that, we also have the technologies. Like, it's this two-edged sword, like with AI and all this, it's is it going to end up in dystopia or utopia? Right now, I don't know, but I do think it's going to bring some great breakthroughs, and I think on the other side, it'll bring some terrible things. So you just got to try to stay on the positives, try to keep that optimistic attitude going and that vision alive, because it's very easy to go down the dark route. And I like during the whole COVID situation, there was a period of time, when our government overreach and the certain mandates and things like that I was totally against, and that sort of shook my paradigm of the world view. It's taken quite a lot to get out of that negative mindset of, you know, um, they're all coming for you. And but now I try to focus on the positive as best as I can, and the people that are doing the good work, and ignoring the other parts, of what bad people are doing in the world. Because all you can do, again, once again, is try and focus on the good and the positive outcomes that are going to come at us as well. So, yeah, be positive about the future.
Awesome. Well, the last question before I close it out: when it's all said and done, what do you want your legacy to be?
I just want to have a bigger positive impact on the world and the people's health that I can possibly have had. And hopefully, I've inspired and encouraged people along the way. Probably have to apologize to a lot of people when I get to the other side for some of the dumb shit that I have done. But I think, on the balance of things, when you look back, a lot of the stuff won't matter. Um, and we have to take a longer sort of view on what is your overall mission. You know, do things good, you do things bad, you make mistakes, you do all of this. Did you give it your best shot? Did you work your ass off to help people? If you did, you can look yourself in the mirror at the end of the day and be happy with your life.
Yeah. No, I love that. No, I mean, it's again, for me, it's there's a reason why the show's called Legacy and Longevity, right? Because that legacy to me, right, is that impact, right? Is that difference that you're making on the people around you in the world, far, that will outlive you, after you're gone, right? What are the things that people are saying about you when you're not around, right? That's the legacy that you leave behind, right? The difference maker, the impact, and that to me, ultimately is going to be my kids, right? So I have a 3 little kids that, 6 eyes that are constantly watching, right? They're looking to see, whether I'm gonna, put up or shut up,
Yeah.
and, that keeps me going, to get up out of bed every day, and instead of laying there dreaming, I get up and start chasing them, right? Because I want them to know, when they get my age, or just, as they grow to get older, right, that there isn't anything that they can't accomplish. There isn't anything that they can't do if they don't put, as long as they put their mind to it. And you know, I I'm a firm believer in leading by example versus, being all about, talk and words, right? So, I'm trying to show them the way, right? And to me, that's going to be my legacy. And at the end of the day, I want them to think that, that they had a really awesome dad. And that's, for me, that will be my life's mission, to accomplish that.
You must
So
be an epic dad. That's exactly what I had, epic parents, and that's why I'm here, and that's why I'm dedicated to mum. Unfortunately, I lost my dad, but he was just epic, you know? And that's the legacy he leaves behind, is my brothers, like that is what he left behind in the world. And so I have to live up to that now that he's not here, even more so, even more to honor his.
Lisa, I've interviewed and I've, spoken to and known, a lot of high performers. But there's just the specific kind of respect reserved for those who've really have faced, just total physiological boundaries like you've had with your racing, and then what you had to face with your mom, right? Just completely shifting your identity, to who you were then to who you had to become, on what people were saying was impossible, right? And you refuse to blink. Most people use this word of warrior as a cliche, but just looking at your journey, from the deserts of the Sahara, from the Egypt and Libya race. I mean, there's nothing that's more amazing, just what you've been capable of achieving. But there's only one word that really fits that, and for me, I think it's a good word, right? And that's, you're a savage, right? Like, there's just, at least in the athlete mindset, right, to be called a savage, right, you're doing something good,
Positive.
right?
I'll take that as a positive.
Yeah, and it's not because of the races that you won, right? But because of this version that you forged and had to become, when people thought that there was nothing left. So I appreciate you coming on the show, and giving us your experience, giving us your story, and just thank you for giving us that grit, that honesty, and just showing us exactly what it looks like, to be wise enough to recover and be strong enough to go out there, and just become an absolute force.
Yeah, Zach, straight back at you, mate. Obviously you're cut of the same cloth, and yeah, it's not to say that I'm the best person all the time. Sometimes I'm shitty and intolerant, and all of the things that human frailties are still there. The thing is that you just, as I said before, you get back up and you go again, and you try to be better, and you try to be better, and you try to be better, and you try to do more, and you try to help more, and that's what I live my life by. It's not perfection by any stretch of the imagination, but it's just keep going, keep fighting, and believe that you can, because you'll be astounded at what you can achieve when you really fight for it, when you really, really want it, and when you know a lot of last story when when I was doing a lot of the ultra marathons, I used to have a sort of a dream in my head, like, if your family's life depended on the next you carrying on and taking the next step and not giving up right now, would you give up? And the answer was always no, I wouldn't give up. If I'd crashed in the jungle in a plane and I had to run 200 miles to the next place to get help, would you quit? No, I wouldn't quit. So why are you quitting now? You could take that next step. And those are the sort of games I'd play in my head to get myself to take another step.
Yeah. No, I mean that's definitely the savage mentality, right? Where you have to play those games with your head, right? To literally tell if you don't do this, right, your family's going to die, right? And you go out and do that, right? That's just it and obviously, for some people that might seem extreme, right? But at the end of the day, it's put it into whatever perspective, yeah, that you need to, right? It's just a mindset, right? People say all the time, I would die for my family. Well, would you live for them? Would you do the right things? Would you eat the right foods? Would you exercise every day? Right? Like, don't just sit here and tell me that you would die for your family. Well, show me what you're really about, right? Show me what that means, right? Because if you would die for them, you certainly would also want to do all these other things to be here for them, to have enough time with them as possible, which means you're doing the harder things of what it takes to be healthy, right? You're showing up to the gym every day. You're doing those things, you're holding yourself accountable into a higher standard that no one else is going to hold you to, right? And at the end of the day, it has to be you. You said stop outsourcing your health to others. I say become the CEO of your own health, right? Build that team around you. So Lisa, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to share your stories, and to everyone listening, stop waiting for life to get easier, right? Start building the version of yourself that can handle when it gets hard, right? That is the only path to true longevity. So I'm Zach Dancel. Go out there, be a savage for your mission, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys. Lovely talking. Thanks, Zach.
If today's conversation sparked something in you, here's what I want you to do right now. Pick one strategy, one insight, one small action you heard today, and commit to it this week. Excellence isn't built in moments. It's built in the daily decisions that compound over time. Remember, you're not just building a healthier body or a more successful career. You're building a legacy that will outlast you. And that starts with the standards you set today. Thanks for listening to the Legacy and Longevity Podcast. If this episode was valuable, first subscribe so you never miss an episode. Then leave us a review to help more people find these conversations. And finally, share it with someone who you think needs to hear it. Until next Tuesday, keep raising the bar, keep pushing your limits, and keep stacking days. I'm Zach Dancel. Your legacy starts now.